Hopefully you guys can hear me now. I should be live. I pushed all the buttons. Low number of viewers. Hopefully everybody's sleeping in. Had a good Christmas. It's Sunday. I know. Cool, Chris, Canada. I'm in Seattle, which is most people think is Canada anyway, or Alaska. Yeah, I'm snowed in. I might be snowed in my office. I don't know yet. I was the first car on the road for sure. Got some snow, and I'm looking out the window. It's pretty rough out there, so I might be snowed into my office today. That's okay. There are definitely worse places to be snowed in. I have been snowed in the Spokane airport for 2 days before. That was pretty horrible. All right, Nicsmas 2021. This going to be a little bit of fire hose to the face. We're going to open more loops. If you've been in some of my stuff before, this will just be a reminder, but you know how it goes. You see it for a second or third or fourth time, and it opens up entirely new loops that you were not perceptive of or ready to receive at the time. That said, since we're early, I'll take a couple minutes to remind everybody. One, you don't want to miss Tuesday for sure. You don't want to miss tomorrow, but definitely don't want to miss Tuesday. Got some friends coming in. Two, if you have ever read a good book, if Nicsmas is useful to you, if you remember a video or something that was hit you a certain way, go back to it. You are a different person the second time, the third time, the fourth time. You are far better off reading the same 5 books 100 times than reading 500 different books. Right? If something really hits you in a way that changes your life, read it again, because you're now, if it changed you as a human, you are now a different human. You are going to read it again, and it's going to hit you completely differently. I would read the same stuff over and over and over, or watch the same stuff over and over and over, and I present the same stuff over and over and over, because if you did your job as a human, which is grow, it's actually a different thing. Good friend and partner of mine, Jeff Moore, says you never step in the same river twice, right? So just understand, reading more stuff. Oh, there's Jeff right there in the comments. Reading more stuff is not nearly as effective or beneficial as reading the same good stuff over and over and over. If you read a very good book or a passage or an article, or you watch a phenomenal video or podcast, and 6 months or a year later, you consume it again, and it feels the same to you, you failed. You are not a different enough person to hear or see or process things differently. The same thing should mean something different to you every time. That it's a version of going back to having a bad memory. Forget it. Forget everything, the details, and go through it again and reason from the ground up, right? Fundamental, technical, narrative. Don't remember the narrative. You will start fitting the technicals and the fundamentals to it. And now you're just one of those a-holes that is holding on to a story, and you are ignoring reality. You're fitting reality to your story instead of the vice versa. You read my mind. I'm going through who, not how again after the resource allocate. Yep. So if something was useful, Nicsmas, I hope, I know quite a few people did with Nicsmas 2020. I hope you go back to this. Hope you watch it over and over. I hope it hits you different every time. That said, this is going to be a little bit repetitive for people that were in Nicsmas 2019. I tried to avoid it, but I just can't. I just, based on the feedback and the questions I'm getting, I can't. I'm going to ramble today. I am not on a time limit because I am snowed in regardless. But mastery came up yesterday in the VIP calls. I'm going to talk about some things that came up in our calls. One is like, people always say jack of all trades but master of none, as if like it's a derogatory thing, like it's a negative thing. I know quite a few, and I'm sure you do too, quite a few people that are absolute masters at a craft and cannot function anywhere else in the real world. They can't keep a marriage. Their kids don't talk to them. They can't function socially. I have a hard time functioning socially. Stuff like that. So again, it goes back to the titles. A lot of people are clinging. Who cares if my life is falling apart? Look how good I am at this one thing. That is not my personal preference. That is the easy way out. If you have an inclination or propensity to do something at a very high level, you can hide behind it and say, but look how good I am at this thing. But that is actually for you the easy way out. It may be the hard thing for somebody else, but it's the easy thing for you. You can ignore that if you want. That's fine. And you certainly shouldn't feel guilty for being good at something. There's a lot of people that feel guilty about how naturally good they are at things, and you absolutely shouldn't. Take the most efficient path forward. Just make sure, in my opinion, we should be taking the most efficient path towards what we want, not the most efficient path that is just easier all the time, even if it's getting us further away from what we want. Make sense? Okay. 6-word updates. So we got some good 6-word updates already. Look at this. Go ahead and drop in there. Discussing bumpers with my wife today. That's a big one. Not that it's bumpers, but that, hey, here's a new thing. I'm going to discuss it with my spouse. Sharing meaning, very important. Very, very important. He's skeptical. No hurry. Boom. Keep time on your side. So here's an example, just to give you. If you say, I need him to understand this by the new year, arbitrary goal, arbitrary timeline. When you give yourself an arbitrary goal and an arbitrary timeline, you have put time against you. There's no reason. We've talked about relative change. Just has to get a little bit better over time. As long as you're okay with things getting a little bit better over a long period of time, time is on your side. My opinion, of course. And here is something that came up. The answer is practical application until it no longer forms behavior. So one of the things that came up, I'm going to skip some stuff. We'll come back to it, is we talk about high skill, high challenge, and we talk about jack of all trades and master of none. And this is just my answer to a question that came in. When do you stop? How deeply do you master something? When do you, for me, it's high skill, high challenge, and then once it moves into a different quadrant, I'm done with it. And the reason it has moved into a different quadrant is because it no longer informs behavior. It no longer informs behavior. I don't want to be the best chemist on the planet. It's always surprising to people, especially when I meet doctors and stuff, that can hold these conversations with them. My best friend is a PhD in metabolic chemistry. We got it when he was 23. So, I via osmosis picked up a lot from him. But when do you stop learning? It's not when it gets challenging, and it's not when it requires more skill. It's when I no longer see a way I can apply it to my life. Could I know more about chemistry? Of course I could. Trevor has a PhD in chemistry. He knows more than I do. But I do not see, based on where I'm at and where I want to be, right, the fundamental of my whole methodology, get what you actually want out of life. I don't see how, at this point, going deeper, knowing more about chemistry, knowing more about biology, knowing more about fitness, knowing more about technology, I don't see how it would inform my behavior and is therefore no longer interesting to me. Because the challenge for me is, what do I do with this? How do I apply this in the real world? Can I apply this to myself? Can I apply this to my life? Can I apply this to my clients, my partners, my friends? How does this close the gap? If I no longer say, I don't see a way this closes the gap, I no longer do it. So just to answer a question that came in a couple times yesterday, jack of all trades, master of none. You know what? If you're a jack of all trades and you know as much as you can reasonably know to inform your behavior, you're probably a great decision maker and you're probably going to get all the things you want out of life. I don't really care personally if somebody else considers you not a master of anything. How about master of getting what I want out of life? Adam says, I didn't want to miss that. No, I didn't start talking until somebody said they could hear me. So hopefully nobody missed it, unless I just had an audio issue. Okay. So that's the answer. If you guys, anybody's wondering, or if you're thinking for yourself, how deep do I go into something, right? How involved do I get? For me, it might be very different for you. For me, when I can no longer apply it in order to close the gap, and I don't see how knowing more about this thing, being more technically correct about this thing, can possibly get me closer to what I want, I'm done with it. That's it. That's when my brain turns it off and I move on. There are always reasons to get better at stuff, of course. just depends. Just really depends on who you are, what you do, how you make your livelihood, where you want to be. That is my personal opinion, and that's how I approach it. And I'm sharing that with you, hoping that you guys can kind of figure out your own kind of way to do it. Okay? That's Kartra. That's not what I wanted. There we go. All right. So here is, you guys will see kind of similarities here. This is not actually where I pulled this from. I'd never even read this until today. I read this morning. Even the best strategy sometimes yields bad results, which is why computer scientists take care to distinguish between process and outcome. If you followed the best possible process, then you've done all you can, and you shouldn't blame yourself if things don't go your way. This is from a computer scientist who writes books about computer science and algorithms, right? Notice the familiarity. What does it sound like? It sounds like a good decision could have a poor outcome. And what we need to do is we need to examine the process, the evidence, the rigor, right? What went into the decision, not what was the outcome. So this is in computer science. Now, one of the things I like to do, which I will explain, I think, in a little bit, is I like to look across multiple domains. So philosophers speak to me. Like, I read some of the great philosophers, and it just makes sense. The problem is a lot of philosophers don't have rigor in their inference. Okay? Let me turn this back on because I'm using my hands for stuff. They don't have rigor in their inference, which means they say things, they observe things, and they say things that just seem to make sense. They seem to be fundamental truths. But they're also not in a lab, right? They're not necessarily concerned about the efficacy of the tools or instruments they're using, or the precision or the accuracy. So I consume a lot of philosophy because it's observations of people that seem to be wise, but there's not a lot of rigor. So we have to be very, very careful when we adopt philosophy. What is always beneficial to me is when we see a field with an enormous amount of rigor, computer science, metabolic chemistry, right? Medicine. There's a lot of rigor that goes into it. There's placebos, there's double blind, it's peer reviewed. So when we see that philosophers are coming up with frameworks that are aligned with what people through rigorous effort have come to the conclusion, then it's a pretty good framework, in my opinion. Right? You got to be very careful with philosophy, simply because it's just observation. That's my opinion. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. So we see here, this is a computer scientist. You could look up Brian Christian. He wrote the book Algorithms to Live By. Same concept right here. And throughout the book, there's multiple examples of just luck, randomness, right? System reliability. The 1 out of 100 times. This is 99% reliable. The one time it's not reliable, you got a bad outcome. But it's not the process that's the problem. It was just the tech was unreliable, and you just so happened to be the one that pushed the button when the thing broke. So that's my personal belief on philosophy and science. I'm much more of an intuitive. I like things that sound good. I have frameworks in my head that make sense to me, but I'm always looking to science. There's a lot of my language. My language is people tell me all the time I sound like an engineer. I have more of a scientific, precise language, but that's not how my brain works. I just don't fall for my own, I have a propensity to fall for philosophy. And I'm aware of that. So I always test it against something with far more rigor. Nassim Nicholas Taleb is the same way. I'll explain that in a minute. So explore when you have time to use the knowledge. This is actually the quote I was looking for when I found this one. So explore when you have time to use the knowledge. Exploit when you're ready to cash in. I will explain what that means in a minute. Because we run into a lot of this. When do I do new things? When do I sit down and do the things that I don't like doing but I know I have to do them, or they know they need to get done? That's a legitimate question. It's a very legitimate question. Because we can't just be off in challenging our self-land all the time, especially if this is not profitable and we need to pay bills and stuff, right? And I'm also going to explain how, once you understand this, you can be kind of an a-hole by violating it, which is what we're all about. Don't be an a-hole, right? Directions for acting, or don't act like an a-hole, or directions for acting like an adult. So we come back to the bimodal strategy. Okay? We come back to the bimodal strategy. And what you might remember is over here we have infinite upside, over here we have reliable. And we want to avoid the middle. Hopefully this, I don't have to explain all of this again. We have things that have upside, we have things that are reliable. Anything in the middle is a job. It's not reliable. Like, we have no idea what's going to happen. We got to show up and put out fires every day, but there's no more upside because we got to put out fires every day, right? So everything we do is either an upside play or it's a reliability play. Now, sometimes there's this middle box. This is called convert. And I explained this yesterday on our VIP call. So my brain thrives right here in high challenge, high skill. When something is no longer high challenge, high skill, I can no longer learn from it, in my opinion. Of course, I could probably learn from everything. But when it hits the point where my brain's like, man, I got nothing else to learn, I'm done with it. Okay? But I like to make a lot of money. So the way our companies are built is, at least a few of my companies are built, is this is Nick doing things that might have upside. The upside for me is learning. The upside for the rest of my organization is usually profit. Okay? And then it goes through this process. This is called convert. I'm just showing you this really quick just so you have a base knowledge. Right? So then there's a team of people that take all of this stuff that I figured out and left half-baked. Their job is to convert it into something reliable. Now it's an asset. Right? My brain power stays over here because I went through Nicsmas 2021 and I now understand myself, and I now know it is a disservice to me and to everybody else that relies on me to play here or here. I know deep down I want to prove that I can buckle down and do all this work. But it is a disservice now that I know myself, now that I know my game, now that I know what I want, and I know where I play best in the Skills Challenge Index. It's a disservice for me to play over here. It's not good for me. It's not good for anybody that depends on me to put me in a zone where I am ineffective. So Wolf Den, if you're in the Wolf Den, I go live, I figure shit out. I in my head, I fully get it. Then I go live on YouTube, I share it in the Discord, yada, 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 and I'm done with it. Okay. Then we have brilliant people like Doc Kev, Callie, Dicka, who take it and they turn it into Medium articles and step-by-step walk-through videos that now they can just sit there and they are reliable information that people can use. Most people cannot take my videos and use them reliably. They're going to have a million questions, which puts it right here. There's no upside because I got to answer all these questions. I got to sit here and answer questions all the time, and it's not reliable because everybody's interpreting what I say differently. I'm going to explain how to figure this out shortly. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, look at this. What else did we learn? So we know that we don't want anything in the middle. It may have to pass through the middle, right? It may have to pass through. Oh, infinite upside. All right, Nick figured it out. Now we got to have a team convert it into something reliable, build systems, operations, detail stuff that I won't do. Right? This is only possible. This framework is incredibly valuable, and I'll show you why. But it is only possible if I know myself. If I do not know myself, here's what you're going to try to do. And I'm going to show you this on a bunch of different frameworks, okay? And I'm going to try to give you examples, but I'm going to expect that you guys will be able to apply this to your personal life and everything else as well. I will try to figure it out, and then once I figure it out, every part of me as a human is going to say, Well, I said I would do this forever because at the time I was super interested. So I got to carry it all the way through, and I'm going to have a harder and harder time. Remember, that's why I introduced this. It's going to get harder and harder for me the further it gets away from my zone, and the more details are necessary, the more redundant it becomes, I am going to get more and more miserable. It's going to take 10 times more of my bandwidth to do it here than it did to do it here. Because here, I was in my strongest zone. By the time it's over here, I am not. I am as far away from my strength as I can be. The thing is, the task list day to day looks the same. So it's really easy to go, what's wrong with me? I used to be able to show up and do this for 10 hours straight. I must be getting old. Maybe I need to go to a doctor. Maybe I'm depressed. Maybe I have low testosterone. Maybe I just need a break. More than likely, you don't know yourself, and you're not aware of your skills challenge index. Okay. Now, here's the other cool thing. This was first introduced to me. First time I heard anything about it, it's Seneca's bimodal strategy. This is Seneca's. I'm just going to give you all the information here. Risk domestication strategy. He called it a bimodal strategy of risk domestication. Seneca is a philosopher. There's not a lot of detail or rigor. It turns out, historically, he's actually a very rigorous human in his day-to-day life. But he didn't write about the details. He didn't write about the rigor. He didn't share the details. So this seems like, to me, this makes a whole lot of sense, right? From a philosopher, you have reliable things, and these reliable things we want to get on track to fund goals. That makes sense to me. Okay. And then over here, we have higher upside. This would be like collapsing time. Okay. That makes sense. Then I sat down and I read Nicholas Taleb's Inserto. I read it like 5 times. And you can see right here, this book, the cover is a barbell. The hidden asymmetries in daily life. And if you know Nassim Nicholas Taleb, he is incredibly rigorous in his inference. Incredibly. Like so much so that when people read his stuff, they think he's an a-hole just because he is so precise with his language. And he's very good at math. And he introduced the barbell. And he referenced Seneca. And he put all the math to it. So this is upside. This is reliable. So now we have some little bit of rigor, right? And now we're back to what I first introduced. Now his argument is nothing should ever be in the middle. He's a day trader, and he's always looking at the asymmetry of risk. He wrote the book Black Swan, right? And we never want to be in the middle. That's the argument he makes. There's upside and there's reliable. Anything in the middle is going to fall apart. This is not reliable. Low system reliability, and there's really no upside. What's the point? Okay. So then I circled back, started looking at, you know what? This also shows up in medicine. Medicine's pretty rigorous. It just shows up like this: maximal coverable volume and minimum effective dose. All right, so that's rigorous. Same idea. You never want to be in the middle. Why would you do more than you need to get the same results? Just more risk. Then we stumble upon computer science. And you can look up explore, exploit, continuum. And it's the same thing, of course, because all of these people at the top of all these domains don't fucking communicate with each other. This is often missed. Computer science, very robust. Medicine, very robust. Nassim Taleb as a trader, as a human, very robust. Seneca, not so robust, but initial framework. So now we have this barbell. So then the question is, okay, and again, I got time because I'm snowed in, so I apologize. It's going to be a long one. Yeah. So you see how, I just see the mind-blown emojis. You see how you stop trying to find answers in the domain you're looking. Search across all domains. Go from philosophers who are just talking about observations and thoughts to scientists who are rigorously trying to disprove themselves. And you're going to find that very few patterns keep recurring. They just have different names. Conceptually, it's the same. This side or this side, avoid the middle. Because it's all about domesticating risk. Domesticate risk, increase optionality over and over and over again. That's all it is. So people often say, there's obviously details. That's what we need experts. There's details I don't know about any of these things. But people say, how are you successful doing so many different things in so many different industries? And the real answer is, I don't do different things in different industries. I just do the same thing over and over and over. Figure out how to domesticate risk and figure out how to increase optionality. And guess what? If you do that, the geniuses in charge are going to do the rest. Right? Technicians just get in their own way. You just get them out of their own way, they do the rest. It's amazing. Okay, so explore, exploit. This is now where we say, all right, when do we explore new things? When should we be looking for new options? And when should we be doing what we already know? It's a computer algorithm problem, right? It's made its way into Silicon Valley. There they talk about the explore exploit continuum, which somebody pointed out to me like last year. Explore exploit. When do we put funds into new technology? When do we just improve the technology we already have? When do we find a better option? When do we improve this option? When do we look for new platforms? You ever hear somebody say, man, why are you even playing on Instagram? Facebook works for you. Just do what you know works. Well, when do we know when we should do what we know works? And how do we know when we should be trying to do something different? Fortunately, computer scientists have been fighting with this for a very long time and documented it all. It is called, so I was saying yesterday, so it's funny the stuff that you remember when you're just stream of consciousness. It's called the multi-armed bandit problem. Multi-armed bandit problem. The fundamental problem, and I'll give you some examples, is if you're at a casino and you find this slot machine, right, it pays out a little bit better than the others. And you want to make as much money as possible. Should you continue to play the one that you know pays out a little bit better, or should you go try to find one that pays out even a little bit better now that you know how to figure out, now that you know the math or whatever? Anybody know the answer to that question? I'll give you a minute because I know there's a lag here. The answer is it depends. So there's internet marketers out there that try to poke fun, like they try to stealth poke fun at me because my answer is it depends. But once you understand this stuff, if your answer is not it depends, then it tells me you have no idea what you're talking about. It depends on time. Yep, there you go. It is bound by time. If you have 5 minutes left in the casino, you should probably play the thing you already know pays out the best. if you're staying in that hotel for 6 months, you probably want to explore because you have time. It is time bound. So if anybody ever tells you, well, you should just do what works, then you better make sure they fully understand the whole entire scope of what you're doing. I'll give you another example. Old people, elderly people spend less time with people. They spend more time with less people. Not because they're antisocial, but because intuitively we know as we start running out of time on this earth, we rather spend it with the people we already know that we like. We don't have enough time to go make new friends and develop new friendships and have 10 years of inside jokes. If you move to a new city and you want to have the most enjoyable experience possible, and your thing is like good friends and good food and good friends, good food, good people, it would make sense if you just move there and you're going to live there for a long time. The highest probability of getting what you want is trying as many different places with as many people as possible. If it is your last day in the city and your thing is good friends, good food, you should, right, assuming you're maximizing the outcome that you say you want, you would go to the restaurant that you already know you like the best with the people you already know you enjoy the most. You exploit when you do not have time on your side. You explore when you have time on your side. So for example, I'll give you one more example. If I get onto a new platform, Facebook, and I say, yeah, I think I can make money here, and it's brand new, and I think, man, for the next 10 years, Facebook's the place, I'm going to explore. I'm actually not going to try to develop a strategy and work it every day. That's exploiting. Because when you exploit, this is why it's a computer problem, you have X amount of bandwidth, right? X amount of processing power. It either explores or it exploits. You're not getting anything done. You need all of your computing power to go to one or the other. Otherwise, you're not going to really accomplish anything. So a new platform, a new field, a new industry that we believe we are at the baby stages of, like crypto. If you are trying to develop a strategy and work it every day and exploit it, you are probably not taking the best path unless you yourself are on a shorter time preference. The industry is baby. It's got a very long way to go. You might be on a short time preference. You might need to retire in 2 years, in which case you would just find a strategy that will get you retired in 2 years. So you see, yeah, Dick has got a serious leg. So you see how we have to be able to process. One more example, because I think this one will be helpful. Because you can back into it. You can actually observe and back into things. So for example, in like 1990, you go to the top 10 blockbuster movies at theaters, and it was like 9 of them were brand new movies, new franchises. More and more recently, you're getting 7, 8, 9 of them are sequels. What we can do with this knowledge, we can observe other people, and we can kind of back into the assumption that the writing is on the wall. Movie theaters, production companies, Hollywood, whatever, they do not believe that we are going to watch movies the same way for very long. So they are exploiting known franchises because they do not believe they will have time to explore new franchises. It's much more expensive. Like 1 out of every 10 might be a hit, right? So you can look around and you can actually watch people's behavior. You can see when a marketer on Facebook that's always just put out free content, now all of a sudden they're pitching. The writing's on the wall for them. They are exploiting, whereas before they were exploring, and that might be the appropriate thing for them to do. Okay, so it depends on your time preference, but also just general industry, medium, all that stuff. Okay, so when do you explore? You explore when you have time. You go back here. when you have time to use the knowledge. I explore in crypto entirely. I don't care if I make any money. I'm trying to accumulate as much knowledge as possible because I will have plenty of time to use it later. On Facebook, I don't explore. I don't exploit Facebook either. I don't care. I exploited Facebook last year. Do not feel as if there's much more I can learn from exploring Facebook. Okay? So again, you can look for all this stuff yourself, but this is where we can start to explore. Now, if the writing is on the wall, if you are in a pinch personally, or you join a platform late and you explore and run out of time, you are kind of an a-hole. On the flip side, if something is brand new and you got all the time in the world, and this is actually the thing that we're more prone to, and you exploit, because when you exploit, you violate one of our rules. Time is not on your side. It may make sense to exploit something. Exploit has a negative connotation, but it's really just doing what you know. If you do what is already known, which is reliable, right, then you, just like if you personally put your resources into something reliable, you are not putting resources into upside. If you are putting resources into exploiting, then you are not putting resources into exploring. So if you are young and you got all the time in the world and all these new opportunities and you think having as much money as possible right now is important, you are going to be an a-hole later on because you are not going to accumulate the knowledge you need in order to continue to grow. Okay, so that's the barbell. And you just got to understand yourself, and you got to understand your brain may live here, and that's okay. But we know that this exists. So we can build a team to convert, we can build a community, or we can just stay here. What we don't want to do is try to do it all. We will be total a-holes. It's a bimodal strategy. Now, here is directions for not acting like an asshole. Shared the barbell. We're going to get rid of that now. Information versus innovation. This is going to be really, really difficult for those of you that are having these conversations. I recommend you have. Here is why. This is Diffusion of Innovation. The first edition was written in like 1960. The most recent one was, the 5th edition was far more recent. Okay. This is how all ideas diffuse over time. Read the book. It is very, very, very dense. And there is a ton of information. And there's a ton of what could be considered innovation, but if you read the book, it would then be information. I'll explain that in a minute. You have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, laggards. Now, this is very difficult for people that like to be smart or like to be right or lack empathy or perspective. Innovators are going to be typically more affluent. They're going to be higher risk takers, and they're going to be more competent. Okay? As ideas diffuse, right, the innovators are bias competence. I walk into a hospital and I say, give me the best doctor. And it's Dr. House, and he's a total a-hole, and I don't care. If he's the best there is, I want the best. Believe it or not, most people want the nicest doctor. It is well documented. They say, you want the best brain surgeon in the world, but he's a total a-hole and won't talk to you? Or do you want the guy that's going to come in, meet your family, hold your hand, doesn't have as good of a track record, but he's very, very nice? Most people want the nice one. Okay? So we have to, Dan says most aren't going to get past page 5. Yeah, I went on this rampage where I talked about diffusion innovation and everybody went and bought it, and then everybody complained about how they couldn't get past like page 10. So, and I'm giving a very rough overview because I've just talked about this way too much. So, the people that sit here are going to bias competence, okay? Which means they're competent enough to understand what the change agents are saying. The change agents are like the people sitting in lab coats doing stuff, and they're typically so knowledgeable that they don't communicate well with regular humans, which is who they're trying to sell to and help. Right? And then we get to the early adopters. Early adopters is probably what we would call innovators, thought leaders even. Early majority is more thought leaders. Okay, and this language is getting reinvented the whole time. And it has to happen. You cannot shortcut this. You can expedite it, but you cannot. Who's the author? Everett Rogers is the author of Diffusion of Innovation. But you cannot shortcut it, right? And so this is where you turn into a total a-hole, especially if you're into crypto. You're trying to explain it to your wife. You have a business. You're trying to explain it to your kids or your whatever. Okay. Here, and I also sit right about here. Okay, which means on one side of me, I need true innovators and change agents. For whatever reason, I have a great time talking to them. I understand what they're saying. And Nicsmas is a good example. I turn around and I articulate it in a way that's a little bit easier to understand what it means for you. However, the mass market will not watch Nicsmas and get it. They won't. So in order for Nicsmas concepts to diffuse, people like you watching Nicsmas will have to turn around, reinvent it, and share it, and turn, and so on and so forth, until eventually the whole market gets it, and it's going to look completely different. And the things that have to be said over here are things I would never say. The things that I say are things that people that I get the information from would never say. They might not be technically correct, but they're useful to people like you. And you turn around and you share it with people that understand you, and so on and so forth. Okay, this is Diffusion of Innovations. Because I can say something. If I was sitting with me and Dr. Lyon, who is good, she's brilliant doctor, and somebody else, and she goes, you say, caffeine, it's not really an energy drink. That's kind of a misnomer. It doesn't give you energy. It's actually just an adenosine blocker. And you go, oh, that makes sense why caffeine works sometimes the way we expect it to and sometimes it doesn't, because it's just an adenosine blocker, right, which is your sleep drive. Let me make myself a little bit bigger, even though I probably got crazy bedhead. Here's why that's important. I hear that information. I have a little bit of uncertainty as to the topic. I hear that information, right? It's not actually information. I hear that data. I hear those words spoken, and it closes the gap of uncertainty. I now get it. That means those words were information to me. However, if there's a gap of uncertainty and somebody says, no, it's an adenosine blocker, that's why it doesn't really give you energy the way you think it would. If that widens the gap of uncertainty, which it would for most people, it's not information. Information needs to get passed from the left side to the right side. If it widens the gap of uncertainty, it's innovation. Innovation is sexy, but it's not good. It's not good for behavior change. If I said to all of you, let's say everybody came for Nicsmas, everybody came to Seattle. I said, guys, downstairs I have a car, the brand new Tesla, right? Drives itself. There's no gas pedal, there's no brake pedal, there's no steering wheel. My guess is you would all want to see it, right? Or at least be interested. And if I said, you know what? Why don't one of you take it home? I'm willing to bet not a single one of you would take that free car. Super innovative. But are you really going to get in a car with your wife and your kids? It doesn't have a steering wheel, it doesn't have a brake pedal, and it doesn't have a gas pedal? Innovation is not good for diffusing ideas. It's good for attention. It's not good for diffusing ideas. For example, again, read Diffusion of Innovation. There are third world countries, there are, like, some would be considered tribes, that still get sick from microbes in their water. And what we do, because we're idiots, we're assholes. This is being an asshole in my opinion. Okay? We send world-renowned microbe expert to these tribes that don't have any concept of what a microbe is. They still think that they're spirits poisoning their water, right? And we tell them to boil their water. Now, this is real. Their belief or religion system is you never make water hot. There's hot foods and there's cold foods. These foods, if they become hot, right, it's dangerous. And if these foods should never become cold, and if they do, we get rid of them. So their belief system is that water should never be made hot. It's a cold food. They don't understand that microbes exist. They don't. So who's the a-hole, right? To me, it's the hyper-educated person trying to tell them to do something diametrically opposed to their beliefs without giving them the base understanding, hey, let me teach you about germs and microbes so that you understand why boiling your water would help. When you think you are giving information, but you are actually giving innovation, you are being an a-hole. Because if you are, my opinion, if you are the information source, you are so smart that you are the source of information, then you are taking the stance as the educated one, which means you should not be the ignorant one. Does that make sense? So we have to understand, we could be innovators in one space, talking to late majority or laggards. Excuse me. We have to understand where we fit. So Dan mentioned this on one of our VIP calls. Sometimes like 90% of what we do with clients and people we work with that changes their life is we orient them on here. That's all we have to do. Say, you are an innovator. You are brilliant. But you are technically correct. And you are swimming upstream trying to run Facebook ads to the mass market. You are not giving, but I give them so much information. It's so valuable. It is not information to them. You are being an a-hole, taking a position of I am smarter than you, therefore this information is valuable to you, but you are so ignorant that you don't realize that you are not providing information, you are providing innovation, and innovation does not improve or modify behavior. If you sit here, you need to talk to people here. And if you sit here, okay, you get your information from the left of you and you diffuse it to the right of you. If you try to make too big of a jump, you are being an a-hole, especially if you are considering yourself the educator. Right? Now, how come it's not their job to understand this? Because they're not showing up on your news feed pretending to be the smart one. That's why. So you are an a-hole if you are on a mission to educate. You are taking the stance of I'm the smart one, you should listen to me. You are showing up on other people's news feeds or walking into their village and expecting them to know these things. That's your job. You are the one with the idea you're trying to diffuse. So we have to ask ourselves, when we're talking to our friends, our family, our clients, our prospects, and we got to be honest, is this information to them? It's information. Again, this goes back to, remember when I said we got fitness professionals trying to impress fitness professionals, and we got authors trying to impress authors, and whatever, academics impress. They're just passing information back and forth, but they're not helping anybody. They're like, if you just do what you do and the people around you understand it, then they already have the knowledge that you have, so you're not being super helpful to them. You might give them a different perspective and you might collaborate really well, but you're not actually diffusing information. You're not having an impact, as people like to say. So we have to orient ourselves. Where are we here? And let's not try to be innovators if we're not. There's no judgment. It's not that being further left is better than being further right. Because innovator always sounds good and laggard always sounds bad. That's not true. It's just where you are. And you can be an innovator in one space and a laggard in another. So that's the trick. I am speaking to somebody that has some uncertainty. How do I help them? I close that gap of uncertainty. Okay? I spent a lot of Nicsmas closing the gap around being uncertain about being uncertain, saying it's okay to be certain, but I had to close that gap so that you were comfortable being uncertain, right? So does this close? A lot of times, especially if we're trying to market or convince somebody of something by sounding smart, we are doing the opposite. We are increasing their gap of I don't really know about this. And then you give them the technically correct answer. And now they're even more unsure because they don't know what any of that stuff you just said is either. You didn't help them. You did not provide information to them. It may have been information to a coworker or a colleague or somebody else further to the left, right? So generally speaking, you have to know where you fall. If you are in this space right here, you should be talking to the people to the left and to the right. If you try to jump all the way over here to the mass market, you're being an a-hole. You are going to get resistance. You're going to be so mad at these people for being so stupid and ignorant, yada, yada, yada. But you are the one making a conscious effort to show up to them, acting as if you are the intelligent one. I would argue that you're the ignorant one. You are being an a-hole for not recognizing this giant gap, spending a bunch of money and time showing up in front of these people who probably didn't ask you to show up. Right? So be aware of that. And this is the question. And we do, Dan mentioned the CCA here. We deep dive on this and we help you identify where you're at and where your people are at. But one of the reasons why, Nick, the way you are able to frame yourself as the interpreter from the innovators to help us early adopters understand the info is part of the biggest takeaways. Yep, I appreciate that. I'll tell you what I told the VIP members the other day. And I'm totally transparent about this. I forget about it because I talk about things I'm done. I live right here. Now, the temptation we're going to have, again, is to go, all right, I built this fitness intellectual property, the CCA, right? This certainty property. I built this, whatever you built, and try to take it all the way mass market for a few reasons. One, there's a lot of money there. Two, you can help more people. Three, you get credit. You will probably blow yourself up, and you are probably going to end up hating your life. So when people say to me, I want to have a huge impact, and they really do live like kind of in this space, the question is, and this is a very general statement, there's always exceptions. If you get your rocks off by pointing out exceptions, then you're an a-hole. Just saying. There's always exceptions. We know that. If you live here and you say, I want to have an impact, the hardest question I ever had to ask myself, which I now ask others, is, do I care if I get credit? Because on one side of me is the information source. On the other side of me is probably the thought leader that has the reach. Notice how I don't have 5 million views on these videos. I don't want 5 million views on these videos because I sit right here. I depend and rely on other people that have broader reaches but can still understand what I'm saying to reinvent it and spread it along the diffusion curve. So where I have the biggest impact and I'm in my zone, I'm the least likely to get credit. Credit goes to the information sources and credit goes to the person that spreads to the mass market. That seems like a really easy, it's a weird thing, to be honest with you guys, because I ask people, they say, I want to have a big impact. That's what I care about. I say, cool, do you care if you get credit? And they go, well, of course not. Well, wait. Does that mean somebody else gets credit? Ooh. And then they wrestle with it. You understand why maybe you have a hard time now staying in your quadrant, right? You have a hard time staying in your zone. You have a hard time. You lose track of who you are and what really matters to you, because you're not really, you want impact, but maybe you just want credit for impact, and that's okay too. Dan could come up with the most incredible intellectual property in the world. I happen to have this audience that shares it, and Richard Branson comes along and says, can I slap a virgin label on that, and then I'll put $1 billion behind it and diffuse it? Right? Well, shit. Now we have to decide. Do we want to diffuse, have a big impact with a big virgin logo, label on it, or do we need credit? Sometimes having the biggest impact is forfeiting the credit. Sometimes a person that gets all the credit did nothing but come along and slap a big logo on it and has a big audience. We need to know how things diffuse so that we can make these decisions from a place of understanding, right? I will never say never. I will never be Dr. Phil. It's not in my, I would be miserable. Right? I don't want a TV show. I don't want to be nice to people all the time. I can't, you can't have a TV show where you just tell people how they're assholes all day long. So you really have to understand who belongs on the left of you, who belongs on the right of you, which is where do you get your information and who do you share it with. And it is okay. You can choose to develop something here and move it along. Nothing wrong with it. I don't. I just sit right here and I let things run through me. That's where I came to this realization while I was teaching Diffusion of Innovation. It took me about 5 hours to teach it the first time, to a group of about 30 people that paid $40,000 to be in the room. I came to this realization in real time, and I shared it with them and said, you know what? This is where I need to stay. And my whole business model, everything was built up from that point forward around there. So you got to know. You just got to know. You may sit right here. You may be late majority. That's fine. You can usually tell by your risk tolerance. You can usually tell by how many people you need to see do it first. I don't need to see anybody do anything first. That's how I live over here. I'm like, cool. That looks interesting and dangerous and maybe fun. Let me be the first to try. If you can look at technical information, if you could just look at a white sheet or technical paper and not give a shit what anybody else says about it and make a decision, you're probably an innovator. If you develop the tech and write the white paper, you're a change agent. You're actually way over here. If you need to ask other people, you want to look at reviews, you want to see people like you that have had similar success, you are probably an early majority, and that's okay. If you have an aversion to risk, if you're not willing to try something just to see what happens, who cares if I lose my money, then you're probably not an early adopter. And that's okay. Just know yourself. The biggest issue with crypto right now, in my opinion, outside of all this, a lot of the problem, you think of I could point out a million problems. They would all solve themselves for the most part if people knew where they fell on diffusion innovation. We have late majority in a innovator space. They're saying, I want blockchain. It's brand new and it's completely decentralized and all kinds of risk and no refunds or chargebacks. But they're late majority personality. They need social proof. They need protection. Credibility, right? These are the people that can just look on the blockchain and read it real quick and go, hey, can you interpret this for me? Okay, cool, got it. And they only look at blockchain. These are the people, safety, right? Competence, credibility, safety, credibility. The further right you go, the more you need people to tell you it's a good decision. The less you care how competent those people are. You just want to do what everybody else is doing. So Telegram groups, you go over to a Telegram group, go, how do you guys feel about this project, right? You're late majority. You're late majority, and you're trying to play an innovator game. That's why crypto's so fucked up. That's why crypto's so fucked up. right? So that's an extreme example because crypto's so accelerated. Please elaborate how the show isn't profitable. I'm not sure what you're asking. It's the labels they don't like. Yeah, late and laggard are unflattering, but even if you don't label it, it's still in their behavior. Like, these are people that don't trust Amazon enough to put their credit card in until everybody else is doing it, but now they're trying to jump into crypto. Right? So their behaviors are misaligned. Knowing where you stand and where they influence your life. Also, yeah, if you understand diffusion of innovation, a whole lot of things start making sense, and you realize, unfortunately, the biggest a-holes, in my opinion, live on this side. They're my favorite people to hang out with, and they're my favorite people to collaborate with, but they try to force information down everybody else's throat without realizing it's not information. And the reason I think they're the biggest a-holes is because they are taking the stance that I am smarter than you. But they are not smart enough to recognize what they are giving is not information. Does that make sense? So a lot of it's like directionality. This is just my opinion. This is how I look at things. Is like somebody that is angry and yells at people that walk by. Like, they might be an a-hole, sure. But like, you're more of an a-hole if you actively walk up to people or find situations to make yourself angry and yell at people. So it's often these ones, the innovators, early adopters, early majority, that have found something that is life-changing. They don't recognize their own journey. They don't remember how stupid they were 6 months ago, how ignorant, like how ignorant was I when I came into crypto? I was pretty stupid, right? And I have to remember that because I can't just go shove everything down everybody's throat. I have the problem. I go to late majority and laggards sometimes and try to explain stuff from innovators. Yeah, you can't do that. That's one of the reasons why, like, Nicsmas isn't marketed. I'm not pushing down anybody's throat. 99% of the population cannot watch Nicsmas and get any value from it. And I know that. I'm sure shit not going to change who I am. I'm going to know where I sit. I'm going to know who I need to talk to. I'm going to invite you guys to come hang out. And I've already had some people say, can I please use these concepts and teach them to my audience? Yes, that's the point. That is exactly the point. And the way people say, I'll call out, I won't call out names. Few people say, how do I give back? And I don't know, if it's useful, share it. If you want to reinvent it, give credit where it's appropriate. I have my unique way of, like, I throw out the source, say, hey, I got this from Dan Nicholson, yada, yada, yada. I don't waste a ton of time on that because it throws me out of my zone. But then there's like the CCA, right? The CCA is our structured way of saying, who are the people that we really believe can take this and change the world? And then how do we teach it to them so that they can master themselves? They can master other people. They can master diffusion of innovation. They can master communication. They can master whatever their domain is, business or personal. And then how can we help them grow their practice to spread, right? We only need 8 to 10 at a time. But those 8 to 10 learn how to grow their business to tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. If they don't have a business, they grow their charities or they just learn how to be happy and spread that. So even the CCA was built right here. And then we put the firepower. What we know is if we teach people how to be themselves, these early adopters here, right? If we teach them how to be themselves, help master themselves, help understand their personalities, their disposition, the people they need to talk to, their businesses, their life, their influence, whatever, they will grow by virtue of spreading the idea all the way up to early majority and maybe beyond. So that's how we have our impact. And, that's how we ethically monetize. So yeah, the CCA, it costs $40,000 a year right now. It's going to be way more than that. But if you get in before Nicsmas, $40,000 for the year, have full access to us. Why don't we grow it to 1,000 people? Because we don't want 1,000 people. the people that we're going to teach might have 1,000 people, right? And hopefully they teach people that have 10,000 people, and so on and so forth. Yep. That's not new homework. So this is, hopefully this helps you kind of orient here. Like, where do I spend my time? Do I explore or do I exploit? What should my business model be? Why am I so frustrated with my parents? I'm trying to explain this to my wife and she doesn't get it because you think you're giving information and you're not. Where do I spend time? It depends. How much time do you think you have? Where do you fall in the skills challenge index? And then we go back to explore, exploit. How much time do you have? And then how much time do we believe this industry has? How much time do we believe our market has? Yada, yada, yada. And we start to develop clarity on the most efficient path forward. Have you heard of the rule of 150? If that has to do with like the number of contacts, that's there's, I don't know if it's 150. There's a rule in ecology that's similar. But I mean that the origin is from the concept of, if it's what I'm thinking of, it's from Tragedy of the Commons. So I'm not a big fan of the rhetoric. I'm not a big fan of like the rule of, if it's the same one, the rule of 150. You know, you can only have 150 people, blah 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 blah, without wrapping it in the context of the origin, which is Tragedy of the Commons, which is a very interesting concept. Yeah. So it's not really, I don't think the rule of 150 is super relevant. I think it's something people pulled out of old literature, which is very useful in some ways, but it's also, it's interesting. Context is important, in my opinion, of course. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shoot over the Zoom link to VIPs and CCA students. We got one more heavy hitter tomorrow. I threw a lot at you guys, but I just, if you know where you stand and you stop trying to be something you're not, life is so much easier. It is so much easier. It's almost like you can engineer luck and keep time on your side and optionality on your side. Yeah, so only so many people you can interact with effectively. That is in the context of Tragedy of the Commons, which means, generally speaking, up to 150 people will interact appropriately with each other. So there's also like Joe Rogan. You tell me, Joe, you go have that conversation with Joe Rogan, say he only interacts with 150 people effectively. I don't know that. I'm sure we could find data that refutes that. So it also depends on how you define interact. So I'm not a huge fan of sound bites. That's just me personally. I think very, very dangerous to thin slice like that. But I'm a pain in the ass, and sound bites, that's another reason why I can't talk to late majority, early majority, late majority. They fucking love sound bites. It's their favorite one-liners. It just not my thing. So I'm going to shoot that link out, and hopefully I'll see you soon, a few of you in just a minute.